I always thought a cruise was the kind of thing you gave someone when you wanted to slow the world down for a while. Sunsets without responsibility, buffets that blurred weekdays into nothing. The comfortable illusion that for a week, nothing serious could touch you. So when I found out Mira had booked a 7-night Mediterranean cruise with the man she'd been seeing, the image of her in a deck chair smiling at someone else made something in me go very still. I didn't react the way I imagined I might in those late-night daydreams. No car chase, no dramatic confrontation at a dock. But that quiet resolution is what would end up being the most nuclear thing I could do. If she wanted spectacle, I decided she'd have it on my terms. Public, undeniable, and surgically clean. The discovery wasn't accidental. A pattern of late nights, a perfume note on her scarf, the way she'd tighten her phone in her hand, those small betrayals mounted until logic demanded proof. I hired a private investigator, not because I loved the idea of spying, but because I needed facts, timestamps, receipts, things a jury or an HR manager couldn't shrug away as he said, she said. 2 weeks later, the investigator delivered a folder that smelled faintly of hotel lobbies and forwarded emails, a string of messages arranging a cabin on the same cruise, dinner reservations, private excursions. The photos were worse, the two of them at a waterfront restaurant, drinks glinting, the kind of easy intimacy that looks normal only until you remember whose kitchen table you once shared. Instead of confronting Mira on the spot, I did what I'd learned in other crises. I planned. The plan had 3 principles. First, no physical violence or illegalities. Those would only turn me into the villain and derail the thing I cared most about, the truth. Second, make the exposure complete and public enough to remove plausible deniability. Leave no room for a staged apology or future revisionism. Third, protect myself financially and legally so the aftermath couldn't be weaponized against me. With that in mind, I spent the next 10 days moving like a surgeon. I moved savings into a new account, made copies of the catalyst evidence, and arranged consultations with a divorce attorney and a reputation consultant. Yes, they exist for people who want to manage fallout without becoming internet fodder. When their ship slipped out of Barcelona, I didn't follow it with a rental car and binoculars. I did something subtler but far more effective. I booked a cabin on the same ship under a pseudonym, and I made sure certain other pieces were in position. I reached out quietly to a handful of people who mattered in both Mira's personal orbit and the public one her lover inhabited. Mutual friends, a cousin who ran a travel blog with a substantial following, and a woman I'd learned was the lover's ex who'd sworn to me she would testify if needed. I didn't bribe anyone. I simply laid out facts and asked them to be witnesses if the moment required it. I also sent a careful, factual packet to HR at Mira's company and to the lover's company, explaining the potential for reputational and policy issues. The notice was blunt but neutral, intended to prompt internal checks rather than gossip. On the 3rd day at sea, while the ship made a slow night passage and everyone else slept or danced, I put the first piece of the plan into motion. I filmed a short, calm video on my phone. No yelling, just me reading 3 facts into the camera with timestamps and the investigator's photos cued behind me on the screen. I uploaded that video to a private cloud and emailed the link to the small group I'd selected. Family members, the travel blogger, the ex, and the 2 HR contacts. The blogger was the one who advised me to consider a public reveal in a place the couple could not control. The ship's scheduled captain's gala, a formal night when guests dress up and the entire ballroom is full. People bring their partners, cameras, and, crucially, an appetite for spectacle. I wanted them to remember who had told the truth first, and how the truth had been presented, composed, documented, and impossible to dismiss. On the gala night, I walked into the ballroom in a navy jacket, booked a table near the center, and ordered a glass of water. Mira, all sequined charm, walked in arm with her lover. Their faces were flushed with new secrecy. I waited for the MC to finish a platitude about charity, then stood and asked for the microphone. There was a collective shocked hush as heads turned. I did not scream. I did not throw plates. I said only what I had to. I introduced myself. Briefly explained that I had discovered an affair and that the couple in the center of the room were involved in it. And I announced that I had evidence I was prepared to share with their employers and, if necessary, public channels. Then I played a 5-minute clip on the ballroom's AV system, the investigators' photos, receipts, and 2 short snatches of audio from phone backups in which Mira and the man arranged private shore excursions. The reactions were instant. Gasps, a chair scraping, the MC's jaw dropping. Some guests filmed. Others whispered. Her lover's face went from confident to ashen. For a beat, the ballroom had that odd, cinematic silence where everyone realized a private betrayal had become collective knowledge. Mira tried to stammer an explanation. There was an audible, humiliating fumbling for denial. I offered her the choice of an honest answer and the dignity of a quiet exit, or the certainty that I would forward every piece of evidence to the people who needed to see it. She chose to stay and apologize. I chose then to forward the packet I'd assembled to HR and to a friend who uploaded the video to a private channel we controlled. Within hours, the lover's company had placed him on leave pending inquiry. Mira received calls at her cabin that were not apologies but questions from family members and colleagues. The cruise, which had been meant as a floating sanctuary, became a pressure cooker. The fallout was swift. By the time the ship docked at the next port, both careers had trembled. Her lover's wife, yes, he was married, received an anonymous message with a link. Friends who'd once pretended not to notice the late nights texted with the cold clarity of people who only support those they can respect. Back home, HR had started interviews and my lawyer had begun drafting the divorce petition. I did not take pleasure in watching her life collapse. What I felt was a complicated mix of vindication and relief. The nuclear part of the plan had not been an explosive act of cruelty but a controlled detonation that leveled the illusion she'd been living, in and left a cleared field for the truth to grow. What surprised me afterward was how quickly the moral landscape rearranged. People who had been neutral suddenly formed opinions. Some offered sympathy, others distance. I had prepared for this. I kept my messages factual, avoided public shaming beyond the ballroom reveal, and refused to be pulled into pettiness. The legal process moved as it does, slower, steadier, and in mediation, the evidence I had assembled meant I could negotiate from a position of clarity rather than chaos. The lover's marriage unraveled, his job hung by a thread, and Mira faced family conversations she could not charm away. Months later, when the papers were signed and the house sold, I took fewer nights out and more long runs. The wound healed into a scar, a line I saw when I looked in the mirror. My revenge had been nuclear in its decisiveness and surgical in its implementation, but the consequence I valued most wasn't her downfall. It was that I reclaimed the narrative of my life. I didn't want her punished for punishment's sake. I wanted the truth to be undeniable, and for me to step into what came next with my dignity intact. The cruise that had been meant to erase me from her story instead became the place where she learned she could not hide.